I will never forget my very first coaching session with Jeff. When I first sat down with him, here's how he started the coaching session. He said, Heather, before we start, I just want you to know I've had coaching before and it doesn't work, so I don't expect much from this. I thought, okay, I've got my work cut out for me on this one. Now, I didn't try to talk Jeff out of his belief at that point because I hadn't earned any credibility with him. I didn't have a relationship. I had zero rapport. But I did know that walking into this, he was a no. He was a, this won't work and I'm never going to get results from this. So I could tell that he was starting off as resigned. So what I did first is I worked on developing the relationship with Jeff. I wanted to find out for Jeff what was important to him. I wanted to understand what makes him tick and where does he want to go? What does he want to get from this coaching? So I just started asking some questions. And as I got to know Jeff, I learned that he was very disengaged. He was disgruntled. He was frustrated. He was just about to leave the company because he was so unhappy with his position, his role with the culture of the company. As I dug deeper, I found out that in his prior company, he was really a change agent. He was able to innovate and run with change and implement change, and that's really who he wanted to be. But in this new situation, he had a company that he felt was not so innovative. They were more protective of their company culture, protective of their people, and weren't as fast-paced. Bigger company, so they weren't as fast-paced as his old company. So after hearing a number of complaints, I started to dig into his day-to-day and say, okay, what's really not working for you? And I uncovered the fact that he had two direct reports that were a huge frustration for him. Now, he was in an HR director role, so he was basically running the HR department, and then he had two very important people who then were managing all the other HR staff and employees. So in his role, he had two different employees who reported to him who had been there for a long, long time, for more than a decade. One was passive aggressive and the other one was outspoken and argumentative. And he said he felt like he was spending all the time working with his two direct reports and solving their issues and not able to really focus on the bigger picture. So now I know that we've got a leadership opportunity, right? We have something that we can work on. There's a problem that needs to be solved. But bigger than that, we really need to focus on how do we get Jeff back engaged and back enrolled and passionate about his position and his leadership role in this organization. Because let's face it, he's disengaged and he's in charge of the human resources of the business. That's not a great thing, right? I moved away from the business side of things after a while to really find out who Jeff was at his core, because what I was seeing right now was just a snapshot of Jeff in a period of time in a frustration, level at his job. So I started to find out what he was all about. Come to find out, Jeff was an Olympic trained athlete. Jeff was someone who was a downhill freestyle skier, if you've ever watched that on the Olympics. That to me is absolutely extraordinary. So he not only had coaching before in business, he had coaching before for his athletic endeavors. And coaching worked for him and it worked really, really well. So I just hung on to that a little bit. Now, he told me the unfortunate accident that he had that ended his Olympic career. He was actually at Olympic trials and he had worked all his life toward these Olympic Games. And he gave up on so many things that other friends went out and did while he was on the slopes training and training and training. But here's what happened. During the Olympic trials, his skis got crossed and he ended up taking a fall that almost ended his life. It broke nearly every bone in his body. He woke up in the hospital after a couple of days and he learned that he may never walk again. So that was the information that he got when he first came out of his coma. Now, can you imagine? This is a man who has faced the ultimate in defeat for him, training all his life and then having his Olympic dreams completely crushed before he ever made it to the Olympics. And he came back from that. And he didn't just come back from that. He proved all the doctors wrong. He created a new goal. It wasn't anymore, I'm going to go and compete in the Olympics. The new goal became, I'm going to walk again. And he put every effort towards that. And he knew how to compete. So he worked and he worked and he worked. And through persistence and hard work and a whole lot of pain, he got to a place where he was walking again. Now, by the time I had met him, you couldn't even tell that this man had had an accident. So Jeff was an inspiring human being. I was choked up as I was hearing his story, and I knew that Jeff had something so deep within him, a persistence, a drive, a discipline that most people don't have. This guy is a leader. He's trained himself how to be extraordinary. And yet he kind of forgot who he was. What he was doing is he was allowing his circumstances to dictate his mindset. That's not what an Olympic athlete does. An Olympic athlete chooses their mindset and they make their circumstances happen. So when I got Jeff back into talking about his Olympic efforts and how unbelievably inspiring the Olympics were for him and his ability to compete, I asked him the question about whether he had anything like that at work. What is it? What was his drive at work? What was his passion? What was his purpose? And he just looked at me with a blank stare. He's like, maybe to make it to retirement someday. I thought, oh my gosh, here's our issue. Here's our opportunity. He has no vision for himself. He has no purpose in his leadership. So of course, he's allowing his environment to dictate how he feels. So I knew in that moment that we had to find a leadership purpose and a passion for Jeff. So I asked him this question. I said, if I could help you to discover a leadership purpose that was so compelling for you that it made you want to jump out of bed and go to work every morning, what would that mean to you? And he said, you can do that for me? And I said, well, you can do that for you, and I'm going to just facilitate that. But is that something that you'd agree to engage and work with and work toward with me so that you can get back into this space of being the competitor that you are? And he said, sign me up. And I knew in that moment that I at least had a commitment from him. And he remembered a bit about who he was and what he had. And this is how I began my coaching relationship with Jeff. In this module, we're going to talk about the 7 steps to powerful coaching. I'm going to talk to you about a leadership philosophy, a way of being a leader that's different from other styles of leadership, like managing or mentoring. Coaching is a distinct form of leadership, and it is one of the most powerful, I would argue, the most powerful form of leadership that you could learn. Now, it is not a standalone leadership style. You can't just coach. You have to sometimes manage. You have to sometimes mentor and train people. But most people I've learned have been directed by their companies to be a great coach and to spend a certain amount of time coaching their subordinates. And yet I find in most organizations had this formal training on coaching to really help them understand this so powerful distinction. So I want to teach you, I want to share with you the model that I've created over the years that's been truly successful for me. And I want you to make a commitment at the very beginning of this module. And that commitment that I ask you to make is that you will follow, if you're going to attempt to use my 7 steps to coaching, that you will follow each and every step by step in order, and that you won't leave out 1 or 2 steps here and there because you're not sure about them. Because what I can tell you is the model that I use works because I use it in totality. If you cherry pick the steps that you want to use and you don't use the full model as I've been using it, I can't guarantee that you're going to get the kind of results, and then you may give up on coaching as a leadership methodology. So commit to learning all 7 steps, commit to using all 7 steps, and only after you've used them for long enough and you've used them successfully, can you pick and choose and decide how you might want to modify the model to work for you. So I'm not suggesting that my model is the best model in the world or the only model for that matter, but what I can tell you is I've been coaching for almost 13 years now, and this model has proven to be incredibly successful. It helps me to bring out the best in my clients. So I want you to consider adopting this so that you can become that much more powerful in influencing the people who work with and for you and helping them to tap in to their greatness.